It's time for another episode of Moving Offline, everyone, and I'm really excited to have Arne Mathiasen here with us. He is in Denmark and he is speaking with a lot of people about not only dumbphones but intentional use. And I'm really excited to have this conversation because it is important to recognize that this starts really early. The earlier we can catch people and especially kids, the better our outcomes will be 10, 15, 20 years from now. So Arne, thank you very much for being here with us. Please let us know a little bit more about yourself and what prompted you to start going to schools and talking about dumbphones with kids.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for inviting me for this podcast. It's I didn't know that was I was impressed that you have like 30,000 followers, and I didn't know that it was such a large amount of people who are like really eager to learn about this. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me on this. My whole project started like I think it's 4.5 years ago now, something like that. Yeah, or the original idea for the project started at that point. I started the company 3 years ago, but it started from my own experience that I, by accident, had to switch to a feature phone, or what I call it a dumb phone, for a period of a week because my smartphone broke. And then I noticed in this week that I felt actually surprisingly much better. And it wasn't just a small difference. It was overall the entire spectrum of the day. I felt just a slight notch better. And I was quite surprised by that. So that was why I continued on living with a dumb phone. And to this point, it has to be said that I don't fully live with a dumb phone. I live with a dumb phone as my phone, and then I have an iPad as my internet device. It seems like, at least in Denmark, the 95% of all people who are choosing to use a dumb phone use it just as a phone and then use a tablet as the internet device, because it seems like it's impossible today to go completely on a feature phone. Kind of impossible, kind of close to impossible. I don't know.
So walk me through some of those challenges, because you started this as a project for yourself and then you started to speak at schools. How do you communicate that difference between, hey, this is for communication, my phone is for these priorities, and this other device is a tool that helps me engage with the internet? How do kids respond to that, or maybe parents that you have worked with in the past few years?
Yeah, I usually describe it in the way of there's something weird about our smartphone, that like, because it's a phone, it forces us to have it on us like all the time. We need to have it within 1 meter. And an interesting thing is here, if you just remove the phone part out of the smartphone, and then you're left with what I would call a mini tablet. And a mini tablet is way, way, way easier to leave at home, to leave in the bottom of your backpack, to leave in another room when you come home from work. And it's only possible to do this, to make your smartphone into a mini tablet, if you are using a feature phone or dumb phone as your primary phone. So that's usually how I explain, and why I think it makes a lot of sense to do this splitting of the two things.
In your work, you have had the opportunity to go to schools and talk with kids. And I want to know what their response is in the beginning. I mean, this world is more technological as we go. Do they present a lot of pushback?
Yeah, they do. But like the primary thing I do is that I have made experiments on schools where I have a thousands of these flip phones, and I make experiments on schools. In Denmark, we have these specific kind of schools where people are living there. It's also called a boarding school, I think, in America. People are living there, and that could be 150 young people in the age of 15 years old, something like that. And it's the perfect environment to make an experiment. So what I do is I encourage the students to, all of them, switch from a smartphone to a dumb phone for a period of 10 days. And that's not easy to convince them to do it, but it makes it a whole lot more easy convincing them to do it when I present it as an experience for them. Like, it's a pretty unique experience that they're going through together and that's, I think, is the key part to convince them, is trying to convince them to do this together, because then it actually becomes a pretty fun experience for them when they do it together. So that's usually how I present it. But it also, it varies. Sometimes the schools choose to make it a mandatory project that the kids have to go through the 10 days without their smartphones and with the dumb phone instead. And sometimes it's voluntary. So I have to convince as many as possible. And then I really have to up my game to convince as many as possible. That's pretty tricky. But I feel like I found some sweet spots. Yeah.
So help me understand, why is it so important that multiple kids go on this experience together? I know that as an adult, it will be harder to convince my coworkers than if it was my friends at school. But why is it so important that we have more than just one? Is that one person not enough?
Maybe it's not all. Also, it's not entirely connected to just being more than one. It's more connected to doing it with the people you're in a closed social environment with. So that could also be if you're living in a collective with 5 or 6 other people, and you're spending your majority time with those people. Then if you do it together, those 5 people, it's really easy to do this. I think it has a lot to do with this, like critical mass, reaching a critical mass of an amount of people in a group. Then suddenly, like this FOMO completely disappears because there is nothing to miss out of. So it's primarily about doing it in already existing social structures. Yeah, that's the key, I think, to it.
As you mentioned, that one thing that comes to mind is, what's the process? So walk me through, what do you talk with parents or students, and what would be the ideal process to implement in my life if I want to make this change? I think of many people that maybe in 2025, they want to have more ownership of their tech experience. They want to have a better experience with their life. So walk me through the process. What should I think? How should I think? What should I do? What should I buy even? Or what are some of those ideas and core principles that can help me regain this control within the digital aspect of my life?
Yeah, I think it. First of all, I think it's about identifying the low hanging fruits, because there is some initiatives, some actions that is possible to take that is, I think, way easier to take than others. And one of them is that don't expect to. I wouldn't expect to go like fully offline. I would much rather go for the middle thing, where you're pulling out the phone part of your smartphone. And I wouldn't suggest to go out and buy an entirely new tablet. That would be, I think, like, because the smartphone is a tablet. It's just a miniature tablet. But I would say to this, about the miniature tablet, there is some problems with it because it fits in your pocket, and that can that is a pretty nice thing about if you have a tablet, a real a tablet on the size that it doesn't fit in your pocket. Then it's fairly easy to make the switch of using a dumb phone as your phone and then a tablet as your tablet, because it doesn't fit in your pocket. Then you would naturally lower your consumption. And I think it has a lot to do with this, looking for the places where you can, without having to lean so much into your self-discipline, naturally lower your consumption. And those are 2 good things: using your smartphone as a tablet, or use a real tablet, then use a feature phone, a dumb phone as your phone. Yes, I think. And then there is some interesting new things where you can lock your devices in. There is quite a lot of a nice innovation in this area. There is a lot of crap as well, I would say, of these boxes where you can lock them in. But there is also some pretty quality stuff. There's the Kitchen Safe. I think it's an American company, actually, where you can lock your smartphone or your iPad in the box for a certain period. And that works extremely well if you're using a dumb phone at the same time, because then it's suddenly much more realistic to lock the tablet inside. It's quite anxiety provoking to lock in a phone in the box because you would miss out on a call, but it's not anxiety provoking in the same way to log in a tablet. Yeah. And I think regarding those lock boxes, I would definitely go for the last 2 hours of the day, locking it in. That could be from 8 in the evening. Then you are making sure that you don't have it for the last 2 hours, and lock it on time all the way up until 1 hour past you're waking up. Because then you have made sure that you're not using your smartphone or your tablet for the last 2 hours and for the first hour. And I think that's a giant step already there. That is a big process, progress. Making sure that those two times in the daily life is without a smartphone or a tablet. That could be.
So what I hear you say is that starting the day without a smartphone and finishing the day without a smartphone can provide other benefits like quality of sleep and, starting your morning instead of doom scrolling right away, you have more time to actually boot up, if anything, your system and cook or take care of your physical needs that are so important, and they can set you up for the rest of the day. I wonder, what are the results that you have seen as people have come to understand, like, okay, I can use my device as a tablet. I can use a dumb phone as my communication device. And also, have you seen other principles that they have adopted as a result of this change, like other lifestyle components in these kids or parents that they have, just said, wow, my life is changing and becoming a little bit better?
Yeah, I think I would mostly want to lean upon the results I've had from the experiments that I've been running, because that is where I have the most clear understanding of what happens. Because I've done this core experiment of 10 days. I've done it with a total of 2,300 kids so far that has been through a 10-day experiment. And the results are repeating themselves. Also, the structure of the experiment is pretty much the same every single time. And the results are repeating themselves. It's like they're talking about, a lot of them are talking about sleeping better. That is I think probably number one thing that I hear. And then a lot of people are talking about socializing. It has become like easier for them to socialize, and they have a different response to feeling lonely. Like some of them mentioned that they felt lonely before, and they would tend to use their smartphone in their rooms, in their bed, to kind of like numb it or something like that. But now they have to find new ways to tackle it, and that could be going up to the dining hall. Those could be some two things. And then also, and actually, I think a funny, interesting thing is that I hear so many of the young people mentioning that they have noticed that they really like calling each other compared to texting. And that I think it has a lot to do with that. It of course, it takes a long time to make a text on these feature phones. And it's the funny thing is that they are always annoyed, and they tell me, "Oh, please, can you in some way help us, like make it easier to text on these phones?" And then the exact same young people are also saying, "But I noticed that I really like to call other people more." And then I sometimes tell them, like, "Do you think that you would call more people like if it wasn't like that slow to text?" And I don't think they would. Yeah, so that's an interesting, funny thing as well.
I have two more questions for you because I think of a lot of parents that may be listening to this, and I can already hear their children pushing back on them and telling them, hey, my friends have an iPhone. Why should I have a flip phone? Or my friends have this account with this random social media app, let it be Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Why can't I have it? How should parents guide their children in this conversation? What are some of the ideas that they should be introducing really early on that can help bridge a more sustainable digital life instead of kids that are constantly, socially deprived on real-time interactions, but just getting all of this information online?
Yeah, it's really tricky. especially when they have reached the point of that if there already is 3, 4, 5, 6 smartphones in the classroom, it's almost too late in some way. It's really, really difficult to take up the fight as a parent to try to postpone the introduction of the smartphones if there's already is just 5 smartphones in the class. That maybe I can talk to that after, but I would say, like, before there is any smartphones, that is, I think, the most important time to take action as a parent. That is, like, definitely before there is introduced any smartphones is the most important time to take action. And what action I mean is to go together, to talk as parents together of the parents in the class, and then agree upon something, like try to agree upon, should we at least try to postpone it just for 1 year and then have the discussion again. And then we can see whether we want to postpone it 1 year more. Because that is, I think, by far the most realistic way of really contributing with some more presence and then, like, postponing the struggle, because it is a big struggle as soon as the first smartphone starts introducing themselves. And I think it can be very beneficial to try to introduce dumb phones or feature phones as an alternative, because it might solve the communication need for the kids. So in that way, it might be more realistic to postpone the smartphone if they have solved the communication need.
So if I understood correctly, the best thing to do is to delay the introduction of the smartphone. And if you can do that, maybe also communicate with other parents about the importance of delaying together. Because if you can delay together, then you have the ability to continue in that progression. And then once kids are 16, 17 or further on, then they can get smartphones because they have built these regulatory emotional skills, or, even just dynamics socially, et cetera, et cetera. That's really helpful. And I think it's going to be something that people can look forward to. Final question, and then I'll give you a final word as well, Arne. So to me, this topic of dumb phones and creating and having guides and lectures sometimes can be seen as, it is a fad. It's something that is happening right now and that is not going to be continually. Why do you think this topic is very important? And do you see it going forward, in the future, even as governments or other tech companies continue to introduce new technologies like smart glasses or other communication devices that may not be as helpful, but at the end of the day, that's where, quote unquote, the world is moving.
Yeah, what do you mean by, like, this? It's a fad. I'm not that.
No problem. If it's just something that is passing, it's the new fashion of the day, and in a few years it's going to be gone.
I really don't think it's like that. I heard an interview recently with I think it was a Joe Rogan interview where he had an interview with Sam Altman, and Sam Altman said in the interview that he was actually quite surprised that we have done so much technological development, but we still haven't solved this thing that we are all, like, struggling with the usage of the smartphones. We are so good at the other technological development, but we haven't solved this yet. Not probably at all. So I think it seems like also the people on the cutting edge technology are also worried about and frustrated. It also, at least that's how I understand it. It seems like the digital detox movement and the whole, like, dopamine detox, and also I think it's this one gadget and trend that where you have a gadget for one purpose. It's all originating from Silicon Valley. It's mostly coming from there. So it also seems like there's a lot of like high tech people interested in working on this. So I really, really don't think this is I think it's something that is that we are going to need to work on for a very long time before we have it completely solved.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I think it's a good perspective to have. I definitely agree with you, and I wanted to continue to have these forms of communication that are a little bit slower. They don't require these high technological advancements or even QR codes on menus. I want to eradicate those and just have paper menus for the rest of my life. I don't know how that will work, but we will have to wait and see. Arne, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for giving us a little bit of insight into what you're doing and how can people understand, find better alternatives, not only for their children, but also for themselves. As always, I like to leave my guests with the final word. So if you have anything to say to the audience, any encouragement, ideas, etc., and please tell us how we can find you and continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think a last idea I would like to also add on to the talk about the parents before there is any smartphones. I think, and now I mentioned to go together as parents, but I think one thing that I even want to like double down on is that don't just expect it to happen. I think there needs to be somebody taking the leadership of that communication, and that can be intimidating to contact other parents to talk about such a explosive topic as this, but it is so important to do that, to take that leadership of that conversation, because otherwise it won't happen. That seems to be what I'm seeing. It comes just overnight, and then it's too late, basically. And it's I also think another interesting thing I would like to add is that this is an interesting field where we haven't found any good solutions yet. Like, people are all over the world trying to hack themselves with all different kind of experimental solutions, and that's I think is a core thing about this, that you've gotta like hack yourself if you really wanna do something positive about your own habits in this area. You gotta figure out how to hack yourself in some way. And if you want to follow it, my company in Denmark is called Dumbphones.dk, and we have a very small presence on Facebook and Instagram. We kind of have to do that, even though I find it very like paradoxical in some regards. But it's we gotta do it. So you can follow it there. I'm posting a little bit, but it is in Danish though. But you're more than welcome to write to me. I would respond.
That was Arne Mathiasen from Dumbphone.dk. We have been so privileged to just have him and discuss a little bit of the topic. This podcast and Moving Offline is just about introducing you to new ideas, new concepts, and new people who can help you in this journey. So I hope that you learned something new today and that you can put it into practice, especially if you're a parent. To talk with other parents about starting late the introduction of new technologies and coming together as a social circle to strengthen the relationships among other parents and also with the children. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. And I hope that you derive some value today. We'll see you next time. Probably a new year at this point in time, but we'll see if I can squeeze in one more interview before the year ends. Thank you again. See you in the next podcast.